and happy Friday to you guys. Running a little bit late this morning. Oh goodness, y'all, school stuff, papers, lost papers, that's what we're dealing with this morning. But it's going to be a fun day because here in South Carolina, it might snow today. So at noon today, they're calling for snow. I saw overnight that it was snowing in Austin, Texas, which is crazy. So I don't know where you are, but you might have snow, which is exciting. It's really exciting for us because we usually don't get any snow till January. So it's very odd that we might get it. I'm hoping that we do. I think the chances are pretty low, but we might get it. Okay, so let's talk about today. It's so interesting how things, I don't know, how things come together and how, one thing leads to another as I'm doing these studies. As I'm studying scripture, and I was journaling this morning, and then I jumped into my Advent study. And so today the first section of verses is from Isaiah 61, and I had to laugh because our preacher pastor talked about that on Sunday from Isaiah 61. It is a prophecy of Jesus, and then Jesus actually speaks the prophecy when he came to earth. And then we actually talked about it last night in our small group, people from our church that we gather every Thursday and talk about it. And so when I saw this, it's like the third time this week these verses have shown up. So let me just share what they are. So if you're not familiar, so Isaiah 61, 1, it says, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn." And it goes on, but so that's a prophecy from Isaiah of the coming Messiah, who is Jesus. And so Jesus begins to teach when in the synagogue when he came to earth, and he says, so they have scrolls, and the scroll of Isaiah was handed to him, and he unrolls the scroll, and then he reads Isaiah, what we know as Isaiah 61. "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor." And he goes on, and then he rolls up the scroll, he gives it back to the attendant, and sits down and says, "Today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Like total mic drop by Jesus. He's like, that's me. And he is declaring himself the Messiah. And that's just amazing to me. I feel like scripture, prophecies have always been just a bedrock of my personal faith. I actually was thinking this morning about a post that I wrote. I actually went to look it up a few minutes ago. It's a post that I wrote back on my blog, my personal blog, when I was still blogging. I haven't blogged in almost 3 years, which I do miss personal blogging. But I wrote a post back in 2013, actually, so over 4 years ago, about how, although that I've been a Christian for a very long time, I found myself in places of a lot of doubt, and I was just talking about how I kind of work my way back to faith. And one of those things is prophecy for me. All the hundreds of prophecies that were fulfilled when Jesus came. And so I just, that for me is just, I can just go back to those two sections that Jesus himself claims himself as the Messiah, that Isaiah the prophet wrote about. What else do you need about who he is? So first of all, prophecies are a huge component, I think, of our faith, and something that we can turn to over and over again. But the thing that I saw this morning that I wanted to talk about, and it kind of wraps up this week I've been talking about, a hard place in my life, and just a turn of events since I started counseling on Sunday. And I know it's only been 4 days, but I saw something that I had written 2 different times in Isaiah 61. So he goes on to say that he's come to preach the good news and heal the brokenhearted. And then he says, and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. And 2 different dates this year, I circled that phrase, the spirit of despair. I wrote 2 different dates in 2017, and that's the way I felt. I felt like I had gotten to a place of despair. And it wasn't despair it was despair of me, that I could ever react differently in my parenting, that things could ever be different. I was despairing that my circumstances and that I could actually change. So 2 different dates I have written on there, so in September, and actually just a few weeks ago in November. I just got to a place where I was not good, and I realized that this week, with all this going on, that spirit of despair is gone. And it says, I mean, just to read it again, it says that he will come and provide, instead of ashes, the oil of gladness, instead of mourning, and a garment of praise, instead of a spirit of despair. So and I believe that he has done that this week for me, that he has bestowed on me a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. And so just as Jesus rose up and said, you know, Isaiah 61, that's me, 2017 years later, I want to say, you know, Jesus, you know, Isaiah, these words that you said, you know, that he would give a garment of praise instead of spirit of despair, that he has done that 2017 years later. That prophecy is true for me this week, and it's new for me this week. And I know he's saying this in a sense of salvation, right? That in our despair of our sin, we have no hope, and we need Jesus to give us salvation. But also in these places of our life, I think it's true as well that in the places of despair, that it's the good news that Jesus came and that he can heal us. It's the good news, you know, the gospel is good not just for salvation, but for our whole life. And that once again, he has resurrected something in my life, not just for salvation, but for victory and for an abundant life. And so once again, he's given me a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. And so I just think that was so cool to be able to be led back to these verses several times. Oh, are you leaving? Oh, I'll come in just a second. Y'all wait like 2 seconds. Okay. I'll come. Okay, they're leaving without me. And that's really what I wanted to say. I just wanted to say that the prophecy came through for Jesus, and the prophecy is still coming true. And I got a garment of praise this week, y'all. I'm praising Jesus for I'm praising Jesus for such a wonderful week, and that he, whatever you have despair in, that he can do it. He can do it. And you know, it's been a long time for me. It's been a long time for me that I have been searching and repenting and crying and whatever, just feeling like I got to the point where I had no hope, and I feel like we have so much work to do. Not everything is fixed, but this week I have hope. I have hope that it can be different, and that we can work through it. So okay, so it looks like my family's going to leave me, and I want to go with them to spend a little time with my kids this morning. So I hope that encourages you guys. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the snow if there's snow around where you are, even if it's just a little bit. So enjoy it. Have a good weekend. Guys, we'll see you back on Monday. Bye.